Right, so the next definition we're going to look at is the deviation from ideal mental health. And we're going to look at the theory behind this definition first. What does this definition actually state you need to show in order to be normal or abnormal? So this definition is a little bit different from the others because Jehoda came up with something called the praise model. And she stated that there are 6 criteria you must show in order to be considered normal. So that's showing all 6 and you are considered a normal person. Any deviation from this and you're considered abnormal. So the first one is personal growth. How far do you develop your own capabilities? Do you try and reach your potential in whatever you do? Do you always work your hardest? Do you try your best in order to develop yourself as a person? If you do, you're considered normal. Are you able to tell what's real in your life? Are you able to have a realistic view of the world? Okay, are you able to tell what you're able to do, what you're not able to do? Is your view on your life, on your world, realistic? If it is, you're considered normal. So you should also be able to show autonomy. Okay, are you independent? Are you able to change yourself, feed yourself? Are you able to get to work yourself? Or do you rely on other people for everything you do? If you're able to do things yourself, you are considered a normal person according to this definition. Okay, you should also be able to integrate, to fit in with society. And one of the big things here is the resistance to stress. Okay, you shouldn't be able to break down any sign of stress in your life. You should be able to show resistance to stress. That's one of the key points for this model. And also, you should have a good self-attitude. Your self-esteem should be high. You should be confident. You should be positive. If you're not, you're considered abnormal. If you are those things, Jehoda would consider you to be a normal person. And the last one is environmental mastery. Are you the master of your environment? Are you able to cope with your work life, your family life, your social life? Are you able to focus in all of those different environments? Are you able to function at work, at home, with your friends? And if you're able to do all of these 6 things and you fit into the praise model, you are considered a normal person. If you deviate from any of these, then you would be considered abnormal. So we've had a little look at the model and there's 6 things. Okay, P-R-A-I-S-E. And Jehoda said that absence of any one of these means that you are considered an abnormal person. So it's a pretty strict criteria. You've got to be able to be the master of your environment. You've got to resist stress. You've got to be autonomous. You've got to be able to have personal growth. All of these different things going on to be considered a normal person. And Jehoda's thinking behind it was, if we look at physical illness, we look for absence of physical health. So she thought the same thing could be completely applied to mental health. So if we're looking at what is mentally healthy, we look for absence of it. If you don't have this, you're considered unwell mentally. You will have a mental disorder. You'll be considered abnormal. So the whole idea and the praise model itself was based around, do you have the absence of certain things? And if you do, you are considered an abnormal person. Right, so we're going to have a look at the strengths and weaknesses. And remember, you can put strengths, you can put weaknesses, you can do all strengths or all weaknesses, you can have a mixture. It doesn't really matter as long as you're getting enough points across. So one of the major advantages of this definition is that it's positive. Okay, it focuses on having certain things. Do you have autonomy in your life? Do you have environmental mastery? Are you able to resist stress? If you have these things, you are a normal person. It doesn't focus on the negatives. Okay, it's a very positive view of abnormality. But as you can imagine, the major limitation is who can possibly achieve all of these criteria. There's 6 criteria there, and you must have all of them in order to be considered a normal person. So basically, everybody is going to be considered abnormal to some degree. There'll always be a time, for example, when you're not that positive. You don't have high levels of self-esteem or confidence. And according to Jehoda, you would be considered abnormal because you lack that certain criteria. Okay, so the criteria itself is probably too strict, it's too stringent, and everybody would at some point be considered abnormal. So a further limitation would be, how do we actually measure this criteria? If we're going to use this as a definition to state whether someone is normal or abnormal, then we want to be able to measure it, to make a definite line of you are normal, you are abnormal. And some of these criteria are really, really difficult to measure. If we have a look at personal growth, how do you actually measure whether someone is reaching their potential or not? There's not a scale. There's not a test you can really take. So in order to use that and use this definition, and personal growth especially, to state whether someone is normal or abnormal, if we can't actually measure it, then it becomes exceptionally difficult to apply this definition to people. We want a certain measure that we can use. We want to be able to measure whether someone does use their potential or doesn't. If we can't do that, then this definition becomes exceptionally difficult to use. Right, another limitation is that this definition was created in the West. Okay, and by the West I mean mainly Europe, UK, America. And a major problem with that is that if it's created in one culture, like the West, we might not be able to apply it to all the other cultures in the world. We might not be able to apply it to the East, where we've got China, Japan, because these criteria might not mean the same things in those cultures. They might have a completely different set of criteria that they need. So this really applies with all of the definitions that we've learned and looked at so far, that if they're created in the West, you can't necessarily apply them to all cultures in the world, because every single culture has their own definitions of what normal and abnormal behavior is. And they might have a completely different set of criteria to what we have.